All right, there we go. How is everybody doing?
Great, how are you?
Pretty good. All right. I didn't see if the recording got posted, but last week I didn't see any discussion afterwards about the extension proposal. If Tasia particularly covered on that, but I have to go dig up.
She had added a fully working implementation fork of distribution with that stuff. But I don't think there was any more discussion about the spec changes. It was just an implementation of your PR.
As it stood. Okay, well, that's good, good. Josh, it looks like you're the star of the show this week.
If people are going to listen, I'll say some stuff. So can you see my browser? All right.
Yes.
So I set out to kind of scrub the repositories in the GitHub organization to look for who wasn't on GitHub Actions, because we had a bunch of failures related to Travis and things like that, and other projects were using GitHub Actions. Beyond that, I started looking into other types of discrepancies between the repos, and one of them seemed to be using pool approved versus code owners. So if anyone saw a bunch of PRs come in yesterday, it's a proposal that we basically moved completely to code owners from pool approved. But yeah, basically in doing this, I put together this simple script repo OCI stats, and it'll clone in all the repos and actually spit out this little report. So red X is supposed to be bad. So wanted to show and tell this. But beyond that, I just want to have an overall discussion on do we want to standardize on governance / automation type files across the repos? Is there any value in doing that? I know Chris had mentioned that like the organization was paying for pool approved, so there's like another reason there beyond just standardization. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
Somebody would pay for that?
Say that
Well,
again?
it used to be a good thing, and it's not been for a little while. Same with Travis. I mean, obviously I can't. I'm not a maintainer on all the repos, but I think in general, Travis and Pull Approve need to go. It's interesting. I didn't even think about like Glide and some of those. I do think one of the projects was meaningfully using Circle CI. So like there's kind of a space here to say we want to standardize on some stuff.
Well, I
I
know
don't know.
I want to say
None of the ones I was
runtime
active in were
tools.
using Circle CI.
Something like I want to say runtime tools was using Cirrus
Mm-hmm.
because of it was related to Vagrant, I think. Maybe not runtime tools, one of the repos. So that one I kind of let go because Akihiro had opened a PR about like how Actions was way too slow for Vagrant. So that I think is a one-off. But besides that, like Circle is really not used. Travis is really not used. Circle was used on this repo called Web, which I don't actually know what we're doing with this, but Vanessa had done a ton of
Yeah, but it's like archived now. Maybe we
not
should
web,
actually.
something else. .github. .github. So this had like this site that she had built, and Circle was generating URLs for it, but she looked at it and the site is down now. So it's just like various things of like this kind of.
They're not good. Yeah. I like it. Even, I mean, like immediately I'm sitting here thinking, because I think you even asked on Slack, but like code owners and maintainers are almost the same thing. But a script like this could actually make sure that at least the GitHub handles that are called out in
That they match.
some aspect of code owners, yeah, matches what's in the maintainers file, or whatever. Because I would like to only have one file there to maintain, but there might be places where we start breaking out additional roles. So code owners could be different, not exactly the same, because it might have different roles. But I'm just thinking, like, there's things like that. And then even the topic of like the governance document of like, if those things need, if each project needs to have its own, way that they handle votes. But I think we have a better way to roll that one up. Anyways.
Yeah, there's kind of the bigger question too of like who owns some of these repos. So if it doesn't have a maintainers file, like I think it's just it. I mean, overall, permissions wise, in actuality, it's managed by GitHub teams, correct? As far as I understand, but it's like there's strange things like, for example, conformance, which I'm going to bring up sometime after this. Like this has people who have been kind of not around in maintainers, and meanwhile, like my name is not in here. And so like what file do we actually look at that? So that's kind of my bigger question is like, what's the story here with like maintainers files, owners files, pool approved?
Yeah, looking at the
And then there's several other ones like this one, and I don't know if this is a legal thing, but maybe I don't know if this just needs to be run for LF reasons, but there's nothing here for 2 years.
There's two issues. Okay, click on.
I think one is me saying, yeah, they're both me. Make this inactive and use main. But yeah, overall, like I've been putting a lot of PRs around this sort of topic. Like, don't feel like they're more just open there, and if we close them, we close them. Like, I don't know what the right way is to go.
I think some of this, a few of these things we've either like somebody takes it upon themselves to fix or clean up some aspect of it, and however far they get. And then some of these are like one-offs that we ping Amy and Chris about. But it probably just needs to be almost like a checklist, or almost like this, like a spreadsheet of like things that need to be done to actually clean this up, and some of this, even like a script like this that could run and just be kind of a report of things that don't look like consistent across the repos. Anything that can help like point out or call out things that are out of sync. It's kind of like the mundane aspect of watching a kind of an organization age, I think, that needs to stay up to date. Yeah, Nisha.
So I'm still wondering whether OCI has like an overarching process for just like regular housekeeping, such as something like this, looking at maintainers files, seeing who's active, who's not active, then maybe making decisions.
I think it doesn't. I think that probably Linux Foundation has some level of compliance stuff, but I think like specific like CI tools and things like that, I think it's then just left up to the repo people. But I think overall, like who has access to what should be a governance, like a TOB issue, and where that list is maintained.
Vincent, you're the fearless leader. What do you think?
I agree. I don't, there's times when I like don't want to ask for any more privileges just because, but how does it break down into different responsibilities? Because even like the some of those repos, like you said, that don't even have maintainers files, like what should be the bucket that they fall into? Because if it's just like a website, or like a bot or something like that, it's just like organizational, it should still have a maintainer and an owner, but like some of those things, not this foundation one in particular, but some of those repos do need kind of like multi-member, like almost like
janitorial stuff.
Yeah, janitorial, but even like a union of all the current maintainers or something like that. Like if other maintainers can come together and not have to have like 2/3 of them, I'm just saying like something to where folks could, if you're, because that, okay, so let me step back. I'm not a fearless leader. I'm full of fear. In the days of when it was github.com/open containers. I think for a while there was literally like 1 or 2 repos for a little while that was just kind of like, foundational TOB charter stuff. So maybe like the websites, maybe there were 3 repos, but pretty much there was like foundational stuff and like website, which like were some members, and then Linux Foundation, like Chris. And the only technical repo for a while were the specs and lib container, and the maintainers of those two things, the specs was what it was called, and lib container were the same maintainers across both of them. And that's why the language is so confusing in the charter about TDC. Is effectively, it was just saying the developers of these kind of things, not necessarily GitHub and administrative breakdown of like maintaining specific repos, but just you're either like a member who has potential like legal patent, whatever rights that you negotiate on like the foundation side, or you are a developer of the specs or lib container, and that was those 2 maintainers files were in sync. And so some of the wording was kind of meant for that, and that's completely broken down over the years to where like effectively the TDC is the union of every maintainer's file across the repos. And so some of these projects that aren't clear about like who's technically in charge of it would be those TDC members, all the maintainers. So what I am a proponent of like what you said, Josh, of like some other way that kind of breaks it down more clearly. And this would honestly probably help in the same like progression to being a maintainer, or like, can people triage stuff, or approve, or like trigger a bot if there's a bot, kick a CI job if it needs to be kicked, but like, like kind of like grading of who could actually have like admin rights of a particular repo, even like an owner admin of a repo, and kind of grade that out into different buckets.
The part of this that's even more confusing is the actual access is like point and click in GitHub Teams.
Yeah.
So code owners doesn't actually, like code owners is going to say, I believe, like who should be asked for review on PRs.
Yep. That's a per repo setting that you can say this person, can kick off a build or approve or LGTM it and whatever, and like you can.
I think like if I were to put like for say like Nisha's name into one of these, I don't think she would actually have right. That would come down to the GitHub settings.
It would not.
Interesting.
No, that is kind of like a workflow thing. Code owners is like a workflow thing. And then members, you're correct that some of the members and otherwise comes down to the GitHub teams. And looking at this, like, there's groups like Core that still have Patrick Shenzon and Ben Frischman, who, haven't been involved in years. Like a lot, even just looking at these members, it's pretty stale. And I don't think that there's a team for every repo even, or project or focus. Nisha, I saw that your hand went up. I'm sorry.
So I would like to make a proposal here. How about I go off and map all of the resources that need that is under this whole open containers GitHub organization, and map out who has ownership and who needs to, like, what level of ownership is required for each one of them. I do have another proposal, which is, maybe take a look at this TOB GitHub, because I took a look at it and it looks like there are a number of proposals that are like create project criteria, guide for proposals and governance and no confidence monitors. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of documentation work that needs to happen within this project. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the first thing to attack. I don't have a proposal over there, but it's just something that, it's probably just like administrative work, making governance documentations or clarifying some things in that. Or
Yeah,
does anyone
I'm
look at this
unclear.
at all?
I think it's something that should go through the TOB, like the 2/3 votes and things like that. I think as far as like the files like maintainers and code owners, I think that should be something that TOB is enforcing. I think.
I mean, it seems like TOB has opinions about it, but it's not written down anywhere. Stephen wants to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna so how many repos do we have thus far? Was it like 20 now? Somewhere in there? 21? A lot of them look the same to me. I mean, it seems like TOB do we have a project repo too? Is there a project one? And then there's another one for like, yeah, project template, and then there's another one for it seems like maybe do we need to make it harder to create a new project under open containers, or is that not what we're talking about here? Is that my misunderstanding? Right, because like
I don't want to like prohibit. I don't think we should prohibit.
I'm not
like
saying
for example, no, but I don't want to make the overhead for making like we had to have a repo for container images recently, and it's kind of just like thrown together. And if we're going to do that, I think it should just come out the gate with like some level of legitness.
Some documentation.
that's what I was saying though, right?
Why the thing exists and what the TOB's decision was for the proposal, pros and cons, all of that stuff.
Well, is that documented for each project in the TOB project? Should we not have a list, right? Of like, it should be like, here's all the projects and here's the proposal that created the project, and then here is a link to that proposal and a link to the repo, right? We don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean,
that's just one thing that I noticed. And some other things that I noticed is that there's no documentation on, how the TOB makes decisions or who owns what project. What's the reason for each project existing? How does
that part I guess has
attribute?
been a bit more loose, but I mean, I guess if it's not clear, then it needs to be more clear. But the TOB usually is just for resolving conflicts, and so I think it's kind of morphing into a general, not that I want it to or otherwise. Just it seems like it's in the lack of clarity that we're describing, it's kind of assumed like all this would roll up to the TOB if we can't figure it out. And I don't think that was originally the intention for the TOB, but so I think it's probably best just to kind of iron out, here's categories for these projects. And if these projects don't have clear categories, and this is almost like the recommendation for the other week of like, if we went through and made some kind of clear delineation, like this project is a spec, therefore here's the guidance on like how voting breaks down in whatever for things that are specs, and here's this other project, it is code, Go Digest or SE Linux or whatever it is. Here's how votes work for code projects, And so if every repo that we have doesn't fall into a defined kind of bucket, and even if that bucket is like markdown or whatever, like these things have to be handled in a certain way, whether it's the .github repo or, whatever, some kind of like website generator, like every repo should kind of fall into those buckets, and at least guidance on how those things get maintained. Who do you ping if you need repo level, or if it's just an LGTM that you're looking for, that kind of guidance. I think all that is basically what we're looking at, and you're kind of fine. You're kicking up against with like the inconsistencies against these repos in this scripts repo, or the scripts stats. Earlier, Nisha, when you said going through and doing like an inventory of all the resources, what all did you have in mind there? Like immediately I realized that I was thinking of certain things, but I think it would be useful. I just don't want like waste your time if there's a good way to view it or generate it, whether it's like what repos exist, what teams exist, what who has what rights, if it's just like on a GitHub level or what, or code owners level.
I don't know. Stephen and Jason have their hands up. Is it okay for me to go forward and answer that question, or do you want to wait for? I guess he has his hand down now.
This is so I just found the Zoom hand up feature, but it doesn't pull the hand down after I've talked, so I keep leaving it up. So sorry about that.
Okay. Well, so I'll answer the question. So I've been on these calls for a while now, and what I've seen is that as far as like general maintenance or like statistics on all of the state of all of the repos is usually something that Josh does, and he's the one that brings it up in these meetings. And then there is no follow-up. It's like, okay, I found this issue, what do we do? And the reason for that is because the governance is there's no documentation in the governance or the TOB. I mean, maybe that's the problem. Maybe open containers needs a governance repo that talks about what each of the processes are, what the TOB is supposed to do. Is there a legislature or executive branch of the open container initiatives? All of that is not, it's not documented. Nobody knows what to do when they approach the project.
I'd go
So I
one
guess
higher. I don't think it's not even not documented. There isn't a process to document, right? Like there isn't. We all keep saying someone should fix this, someone should do this, someone should do a survey of repos and put them in the right order, but nobody says who that is. I think, Vincent, your comment that this isn't exactly TOB's responsibility kind of scared me, because I don't know what higher authority there is than TOB in this case. Like I don't know I don't know who would do it if it isn't TOP. Who breaks the logjam if it isn't TOP?
No. I'm sorry. Then I misconveyed the.
Or I misunderstood. It's possible I misunderstood.
That the thing was just like in the days when there was just like specs, which was really ambiguous, and that's why it later broke up, and broke into runtime and image. But in the days of like specs and libcontainer, that was all the developer, maintainers, like really, that was like the active thing in that space. And basically because there was so many people from different companies and it was a contentious spot, if there was ever any like dispute that the maintainers of that group couldn't figure out in a 2/3 majority, then it would bubble up to a TOB. And so it was really just kind of like expect to do nothing as a TOB. Like people should play nicely together, and if they don't, then bubble it up. But now that we've kind of like, 5 years on, have different machinations and, like, how is this thing conformant and, like all these different aspects, and like there's much more moving parts now and much more people involved. That role has changed. That's what I was saying. It's like, it was never really intended on that, but it is kind of the bucket that a lot of these things fall up to. But like you said, there's no process defined, because that's originally, it was like, I expect that we'll be doing nothing as a TOB. We're just there if somebody needs us to break the logjam, not to like say, not to come in and say, this is how things should be done. Like,
yeah, I understand that attitude. Where like, you're right. At the time that the TOB was defined, that was their main job. And so if you expect never to have conflicts, then it's a pretty cushy job. You don't have to do a lot. But I think now we have a conflict against inertia. We have a conflict against like lack of clarity, and nobody knows who owns half of these things. Like that's the conflict now.
Read what Samuel just pasted in the chat.
I think it's important though to frame, rather than saying like, oh, we have a conflict of inertia. I find it best to be very specific about what you're trying to do and you can't do, because otherwise they're just kind of like, I think when we created this project, it was very much like you bias for action, right? So you do something, you figure out how to do it. If it really is against the rules, don't do it, and then go figure out why not, and then have a discussion around it. What concerns me about this conversation a bit right now is like, we're saying, okay, we need these governance, blah, blah, but we don't really understand what we're not doing. And the areas that so like take the artifact spec or the some of the stuff around the working groups. Like, we created the working groups. I think a lot of people LGTM'd it. Why aren't we driving that? So when we say, hey, we're fighting against inertia, what do you mean? What are you trying to do that you can't do? Be specific, and then we can go figure out whether more work needs to be done. But like, I think like creating a bunch of governance structure without having something technical or something for our users that's driving that governance structure is just going to be a practice in rulemaking and not necessarily going to do anything for the project as a whole. So like, I just want us to be extremely specific.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think I'm advocating for more formal documented governance, and this group shall be responsible for whatever. I think the specific technical issue I think we are unable to resolve is that some repos are clearly just abandoned, and nobody knows whether they are functionally actually should be abandoned or should be removed. And even just like getting Travis removed from repos is not, people don't know who to go to ask whether we can get rid of who to ask to approve that PR. And that's like basic, cleaning, sweeping the cobwebs out of the attic is not possible to get done because nobody knows who's responsible for that attic.
Well, but why can't we go to the TOB and say, I want to clean up repo X? And that's
I agree.
Is that on the mailing list of dev mailing list? Like, we should just go through each one and say, this one has been abandoned, who's responsible for it? If we really need to change the charter or something like that, great. But I think like the TOB can handle that. Like, that's in their role. Their job is to in that role they are to resolve these conflicts. And I think like going further with governance, that would be great, but I think we just need to solve I mean, what is there, five repos maybe we need to go in and figure out the future of, right? Like going through governance and rulemaking to solve that seems heavyweight when we could just go and figure out which of these repos. I would just say, send it to dev, send it to the TOB mailing list. Let's have a discussion there, get it worked out, change the, figure out what votes we need to do. And I think for a lot of these, the TOB could say, hey, I'm going to vote in 4 maintainers or something like that to resolve this conflict. I don't know exactly. That's just an example of what they could do, but like that, to me, that would be 100% the role of the TOB. And maybe if we did make a governance change, is the TOB can make these decisions. So hopefully that helps.
You and I agree. I
Pasted
think Sam
part
had
of
it.
the charter in there. The TOB already has the role to deal with what it calls high level issues that cannot be resolved in the TDC. And so I think that right now we're having high level discussions around management of the things that exist in OCI, and that is the role of the TOB to deal with. So if I think what Stephen Day was just saying is right. Like this is the kind of thing to post on the dev mailing list and come to consensus, or the TOB mailing list and come to consensus, and then we can act on it. I don't know that we need a governance change for it, but we already have the structure that says, here's who is responsible for dealing with it. It's the TOB. So if you have something that you want the TOB to deal with, ask.
Via mailing list.
Yeah. So that like these weekly meetings are not really part of, like, not everyone comes to them. They're not part of how we necessarily do decision making. They're a good chance to like talk about things, but if you read the charter and you read the stuff that's in the TOB repo, it mostly talks about we do discussions in the open on the mailing list.
Yeah, and it would be great to hear like maybe Chris Anisek is like, yeah, here's what was the one that started with F, the foundation, right? Like, he could say, hey, the foundation repo is here for this reason, and we're going to go document that reason. We can set up PR, right? Like we should just do this on the mailing list and get through it. And I think we can move on from it.
I do want to.
So let me.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. So yeah, I had my hand up. So I do want to point out first that there isn't anything in the README that says all decisions happen on the mailing list. It's in charter maybe.
Well, we can't make a decision here because this isn't the TOB.
Well, okay.
The TOB, I just pasted from the charter. There is section 6C talks about the TOB operates on the mailing list.
So if some now that you have several projects going, where can someone like me who has not been involved for that long and is wants to ask a question, where can they go to do that? Because
the mailing list, like the dev@opencontainers.org mailing list. You send an email, we discuss, and we figure it out. And then like there's a TOB mailing list. Do we need to update that on the README? Is that not there?
I mean, or Slack, yes, but it depends.
Well, no one knows. Okay. Well, I'm gonna keep quiet now.
No. I'm curious.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
What you were asking? Where does someone go to figure out how to ask a question? And that it's a viable point.
Okay. So what I'm noticing over here, and this is my experience, your mileage may vary, but what I'm noticing is that I get the most immediate feedback when I come to these meetings. The first thing I started off with was the mailing list, and there wasn't really much activity going on the mailing list. So, what I want to say is that yes, all of this is documented, but there isn't really any, solid follow up. Stephen is asking for specifics, and that's what everyone else is asking for too. But it's not a two-way street. Like the TOB is asking for specifics. We don't get any specifics from the TOB.
Like, is there a proposal that you can use as an example of where this didn't happen?
I mean, so this is dating back like 2 years ago, but I'm noticing this with other folks as well. Steve's been here and proposing this OCI artifacts thing. We've had many conversations around how to actually get that into the OCI specification. It's bounced around from, you know, submitting a proposal to the distribution spec, and then it moved to its own repo, and now it's sitting in a proposal stuff. That to me at a higher level makes me think that the TOB is, well, it has some trouble making decisions.
Do you think
I think you could call it
all
dysfunctional.
well, do you think all proposals should be accepted?
Well, no, but at least commented on what the problem is and make a decision on how to move forward. It is a decision. What I'm finding it is that there is no decision being made. Like, yes or no, is this something that the community wants? Yes or no? What we say is, oh, we'll look at it, and oh, I have some ideas, and oh, I think it would be good if it goes over here. There's no yes or no. Steve has his hand raised.
Well, I mean, the artifact stuff is the interesting example of this. And I think, we got far enough to create an artifacts repo, which was scoped at documenting what the existing specs does. And we did that, 2 years ago, whatever it was. And then, we've had a lot of success with it. And then we're trying to go to the next step. What's happened is when we've gone to the next step is we kind of hit a head wall of how the original specs were set up. And that's why we try to just operate within the artifacts repo, right? That's what the charter says, but the charter did not approve us to actually create new specs. It was going to be documentation how to use the existing specs. That's fine. So now we're faced with this question of, we are talking about refactoring some of the specs, and how do they split up from one particular type, the container image, to supporting more generic types, which was a conversation we had when we created the artifacts repo. Did we want to do it? Because we talked about, we can go to CNCF. That was a choice at the time. And we, as a group, the TOB, decided to keep it under OCI. What I think we're talking about here is, it's not just the original container image format and how it's run and stored as a single thing in a registry. It's how does OCI evolve to support a broader set of spaces and scenarios. And like the artifacts project is very active. It's just we hit a wall on what we can do in that repo. So we're creating a spec under CNCF to hopefully have this adopted by OCI. I think that's the question for a TOB is, what do we want to see going forward related to these specs? Are these specs very narrowly focused on a container image? If that's the case, that's okay. But that, I think that's part of the guidance that Nisha is talking about, is we don't have clarity. We do keep on getting, No, actually, this is interesting. We do want to consider it here as opposed to, no, it doesn't fit. Go over CNCF. That's fine. So what do we want to do? Chart.
Where are the proposals that are getting rejected, Steve? You show me the.
I think that's part of the problem. They're not actually rejected. They sit
Yeah,
in
they're
limbo.
not. They just sit. Yeah, that's exactly.
I'd be fine if
my
somebody
point.
says, we're not doing this. Go away.
So-
More politely.
So I mean, I'm not on the I'm not on the TOB, but I've gotten a lot of feedback on the positioning of the artifact spec, and I think there's some issues that I'm kind of seeing with it, and maybe others don't feel as comfortable to give that feedback. So that it could be that, but like I don't know what I'm looking through my mailing list box for dev open containers and stuff, and I'm not seeing the proposals laid out in those mailing lists. But if that could just because I'm poorly searching, so it would be good to show us what those proposals are and show why they're getting getting rejected, right? Or just sitting there, right? Because again, it's really easy to say like, oh, the TOB doesn't do anything, right? But that's not actionable feedback. Better feedback would be they didn't do anything on this specific item. And I think that like, if we talk about the very specific proposals, like I made the proposal for XYZ and it just sat there so that we can specifically address that, I think we'll get much further than if we like say, oh, the TOB is not doing anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But not everything has happened on the dev mailing list. That the dev mailing list is not a great forum for conversations. It's a great way to tease something in and say, hey, by the way, there's this PR. Can we discuss this? So there is lots of feedback on the artifacts PRs. There's 27, there's 29, there's 37, and then we went for the OCI TOB 96 that prompted the working group. So it's not that there's not conversation and engagement. It's not all centered on the dev alias. The dev alias has been the linker to where the conversations are happening. Because I don't want to, for the feedback, I'd love the feedback. Any feedback that we've had, we've addressed. But I think your question is from a process perspective, we've been trying to follow as much as we can. And then like even the vote for a working group, it's been going on for a while. There's various conversations around why we're waiting for the next step, but like all of that has been extremely transparent, open, and waiting for action.
What do you expect the next action on the working group? Because I see, so there's a TOB working group for reference types. What's the next action that you're expecting from the TOB?
To vote whether the TOB is going to enact that working group to get started.
Okay, so is there, so I don't know if I have access to the TOB mailing list. Have you initiated the vote? I think that's a responsibility for the TOB members, right?
I see Vincent's got his hand raised. I mean, this has been the conversation we've had for months. There was first of all, there was no working group definition. So that's how that got spawned. So then the group went off and created a definition for working groups. While that definition was being created, I made a proposal so that, hey, can we we will make changes to the working group proposal based on how the definitions, but this is the way we're thinking about it. Derek did a great job getting that structured. The lawyers took over, and now we've been sitting there for a couple of months to figure out how do we vote and move forward.
Josh has a conformance topic, and Vincent has his hand up. I think we can ask Vincent for his opinion. Or not, Vincent.
I'm going to plead ignorance. I thought it was, I did not, okay. Let me say this very, very frankly, I didn't think it was my responsibility to kick off the vote for the TOB. Like, is this completely ready to be voted on? Yes or no? And I thought that there was still conversation going around, and we're waiting to say, are we ready to vote on this? Yes or no? And I think I was waiting on that. if it's in my lap to kick off that vote, then I'm like, yes, we're ready. Start the vote now. Because I was thinking, even when we talked about this at the summit, like, is this ready to vote on now? Yes or no? Can we get this closed within a week or two of like the voting time period? And there was no definitive like, yes, we're ready to vote now. So I did nothing. There's a strong yes, hoping that somebody else will do it, like, you know, whether it falls in your lap or not. And because we're working across, you know, different teams and companies and people, and like saying, like, assigning somebody something to do or whatever, and knowing that this might not be some people's day job, I think that's why some of these tasks, you know, get in a flurry of activity and then they fall by the wayside. That's kind of natural. There is like, there's a lot of like was just said, this is a can of worms that's been opened. The actionable things here are from where this conversation started, and then kind of, you know, obviously has very viable things to address here. There's organization that needs to be clarified, and like just tidying and roles and whatnot. I think we have good ideas on that. The uniformity stuff that this stats repo is out there is great, because that's been bothering, I think, a lot of us, that things seem out of sync with each other and kind of stale or otherwise. And that's great, but all the stuff about mailing list and all, like, that could all be, you know, a sinkhole of conversation. I think the big thing is like actually probably people getting comfortable with like either appointing somebody or standing up and taking action. And if something doesn't have like somebody who says that they're going to do it and then follow up to say, hey, you said you're going to do this, did you do it? Then not really getting upset about it, because I think everybody's busy and everybody has important stuff to talk about, but it falls by the wayside. So there's also just some amount of patience that, or patience or understanding or otherwise. So just seeing like, oh, it didn't have an owner, that's why it got dropped. And so what's the process of making sure that owners, you know, get tracked all the way through? Because it's hard to dredge up, you know, years of minute interactions and say this is a single point or something went off the rails. So I was trying to what I was trying to like actually type out what's the actionable items, and then like how can we actually just maybe set a part of a rolling agenda to say, here's the to-dos that somebody said in the past, what happened on them, and when do you think you'll have them done? Josh, do you think you can do your conformance thing in 7 minutes now that the can's been spilled?
I will attempt to take back some. Steve, anyway, I'm just gonna take over here.
No, go ahead. I wasn't trying to redirect it. I was trying to use it as an example. I really wasn't trying to turn this into, hey, let's do the TOB vote. I think that started. My point was more of testing some of what we're discussing, that I think we are trying to do some of that, but we are hitting some, I don't know what's process, if it's time or what, on how do we proceed with things that aren't, I mean, even some of the easy peasy, you know, simple things take forever to get done. And I think it's because we don't have as much engagement because people are busy. The things that are more complicated don't fit within one repo. Those have been all about pause. So that's the question I think goes up to what you're trying to do here with some of the government stocks.
I want to point your attention to this image, and I don't know if anyone's heard of this meme, but this could be us, but you plan. I don't recommend that you actually Google that, but I want to point your attention to this repository, Kate's Conformance, and just how active this is. 465 contributors, last commit 6 days ago. And just to, you know, give some background on how this works, this is what the OCI Conformance was supposed to be. And we haven't had people submitting. So beyond me, pinging people on the side. I don't really know how else to encourage folks to submit, but basically the way that the Kubernetes one works is for each new version of Kubernetes, there's a folder in here for a specific distribution of Kubernetes, and all you have to do is just submit a README file and a XML, like a JUnit XML that says how to run conformance against this distribution. So as long as you've run it on your own, you can submit these files into the repo. And that's the idea with OCI conformance. So instead of having a top level, versions folders in the repo, the idea was to nest it one level deeper under the name of the spec. So we have a distribution spec folder, and under here I'm hoping v100, and then Azure Container Registry, Google Container Registry, open source registries, but it has to be submitted by the people who are responsible for the registry. So if there's anything I can do to help you, I know many people are running the tests, so it's a matter of if you're passing the tests, even just the pool tests, which I know is controversial, but even if you're just passing the pool test, I would like for you to come and open a PR with these files. And there's a markdown file instructions in here. And when you run the distribution conformance suite against your registry, it's going to spit out this report, and that's the HTML report that you can find here, for example. So basically run that, get it working. You don't even need to, you can like scrub details about the registry you're testing against and submit it. And yeah, that's my sales pitch. Thanks. And if you need help, just like let me know.
I think it would be, and so this is like just something that we could point to, like we could send an email to the Quay folks or whatever, and or whoever, of like run these steps, open a PR like this template, and like it's all that's up on the website already of just like how to.
I mean, it's in this repo. There's an instructions.
Yeah.
And maybe I ought to just send a mailing list thing to remind people. But the idea was after distribution spec hit 1.0,
Yeah.
which has been several months now, that people would submit PRs. So there's like Zot was the first people to get on this, but this was back when we were starting, and so I had like a v1.0 pre folder.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm reaching out to Ram. I want him to resubmit for this version. It's just like, how do I encourage people to do this? And
yeah.
Yes, it did hit one. It did hit 1.0 a while ago.
Yeah, that was my brain fart. I think that's good.
Can I ask a dumb question? Is distribution a reference implementation or just another registry thingy?
All right, looks like it's about 2 o'clock here, so.
No.
It's the reference implementation. I mean, like the original spec was written at the same time as that, as distribution. And then most of the OCI stuff we've prototyped inside of the distribution. So not all of it, but a good part of it. But I don't know if we can call it out as an official reference implementation.
Yeah.
It's not the official reference implementation in the OCI because it's not an OCI project.
Well, that's partly because I didn't want to have reference implementations. I mean,
It
this
is
was
an
one of the-
implementation of the spec, and I think Stephen is right about the history of how it was developed and how the spec was developed, but I don't think it's like, I wouldn't call it an official reference implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, de facto maybe. I don't know. But it's not the only one out there. So
Well, I mean, I do have a follow-up question, if I may. Um, since distribution is a de facto implementation, and if that is not conformant to the distribution spec, then what incentive is there for other registry providers to also be conformant?
bingo. That's a hard one. Shame, yeah.
I am sorry, I'm opening up too many worm cans.
Sajay's got his hand up.
Hey, I put the completion of the proposal for the extension API. I think last week Mike Brown had kind of like spoken about it 2 weeks ago, and last week Stephen had kind of like spoken about the reference implementation to just show in distribution project also. Is there anything pending from the merge of that one, or do we need to do something more? Just kind of a follow-up would be really helpful if at all. That's 111 for reference.
I think it would probably be helpful to identify specifically which project this is relevant for, which specific set of specifications, and thus which specific set of maintainers we need to get eyeballs on and opinions from.
Yeah, the distribution PR is for distribution maintainers. I'm actually not a maintainer over there, so but I am a reviewer and I have looked at it. I don't know if I can give it an LGCM or not. Is that what you're looking for, Sajay?
This was on the distribution specification only.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we can follow through with the distribution PR if the proposal for the spec is what you say acceptable in some draft form. That's what Michael Brown was helping with, like saying that this is subject to change and has no what you say support that would possibly come through. And regarding the alignment of which projects would help it, I think if the direction is positive in that form, then we can submit the follow-up implementation of how references can be stored and how the Notary project can actually use that as well. So that will be the alignment for the project question.
Yeah, I think the spec changes needed those two conversations resolved, and then we can go ahead and get it merged. I think the question of is this implementable was answered by your team. I think there are some questions around extension endpoints, basically. I think that was the discussion from last week. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So do we? So we have, I think Brandon had put a proposal to kind of like change the output of the extensions. I don't have any strong yes or no reasons for that. So we can kind of like take that.
Oh yeah. So Brandon's reasoning is very good. And I just, I linked this. Yeah, okay. That one's another one so he's saying put it in a name field. And the reason to do that is if you add other fields or change it in the future, it's a lot easier to add fields if you have an object, whereas if it's just strings, it's really hard to extend in the future. So that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, we can take that.
And Sajay, hey, feel free to ping me offline or ping in the distribution channel and we can discuss so you're not blocked.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, great.
Very good. I'll actually try and get the recordings up sooner than later. I see that the one from last week hadn't been posted yet. So it probably is even useful if being able to send, have referenceable clips of point in time when we talked about things. So thanks everybody for joining. The conversation, even if it is, spilling a discussion out, is good because it shows at least symptoms of things that need to be addressed. So there's a few, I would encourage everybody to actually put, in action items on the doc, put your name down on specific things. Like I think it's great, the stats there. And I think looks like Nisha had to drop, but those kind of items to address or map out are useful. But let's actually do something to actually track back on when we say we're going to have a pass to do to work on it and follow up on it the next time. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
Kyle.
Cheers.